Welcome to the webinar. Tonight's presentation will start at 6:05 and it will be Jim Long, President, CEO of Genesis. 8:45, so 6:45, we'll do a question and answer and we will be closing promptly at 7. So a big welcome and thanks to Jim Long for agreeing to give us an insight into the Canadian pig industry. Jim is President, CEO of Genesis. Jim is a graduate of the University of Western Ontario. He's responsible for the direction of Genesis, drives change and sets the strategy and vision for the company, overseeing the day-to-day business of running and managing the company. Jim writes a weekly commentary on the pig industry that is picked up not only in English and Chinese, but in 15 additional languages across 27 countries around the world, making Jim one of the most recognized names globally. Right, many thanks and over to you, Jim.
Thank you very much, Patrick. My pleasure to be here today. I'm actually traveling. I'm in Western Canada, and just to put it in perspective, it's with the wind chill factor, it's -33 here today. So wherever you are is better than where I am. But we're here. Look forward to the opportunity to give a presentation, talk a little bit about Canada, talk some of the perspectives we have, what's going on in the world too. So next slide, please, Maya. So put it in perspective. I've been to Great Britain, lots of people there. You've got a lot of, Canada was to a large extent colonized by Britain. So, we're part of the British Empire, we're part of the Commonwealth. There's a lot of commonality. Most of the language here is English. We do have some French. Just the geography here, Canada is a huge country. We've got the Trans-Canada Highway goes about, I got to get it right here. I've lost the slide on the webinar, so for what it's worth. 4,600 miles east to west across 5 time zones. So it's a big factor for us. Space, time. Canada's a big country, but we only have 38 million people. Now, Canada is a country of immigrants. We have people from everywhere in the world. As I say, English based other than in Quebec where it's French. And within our company, we have people working with us that in multiple countries, okay? And it's part of the uniqueness probably of Canada. Within Canada, we produce huge volumes of grain and one of the world's main grain exporters. So as a pork industry, there's no shortage of feed. Doesn't mean it's cheaper by any means, but we have it here. We don't have to count on imports of any extent. So as I said, Canada is a country of immigrants. My family history tells us the Longs came from Howden, Yorkshire, and we ended up in London, Ontario, about 150 years ago. It's kind of interesting. London's, got the Thames, London, Ontario's got the Thames River, Wellington Street, a lot of British names. It was a British garrison town that was established to kind of watch the Americans when they kept on thinking about invading Canada. I'm going to go with this quote. They're always telling Irishmen that you can't tell them much. I'm from Yorkshire. Maybe that's why my family ended up in the pig business, because some of the best pig people in the world, best stockmen in the world came from England. I'm not saying I'm one of them by any means, but, as you know, Yorkshiremen have no problem with opinions, so you're going to get opinions. So I'm looking forward to at least trying to say what I think. Next slide, please. As a company, we believe in the UK market, Genesis. We have 3 collaborative production facilities producing genetics in the UK. Bridge House Farm, which is owned by the Thompson family, Treviget Farm, Shute family, Rousselot Produce, Wiley family. Combined over 4,000 cells in nucleus of multiplication. AI and females are genetics are marketed by Genesis UK and Glen Marshall Sires. Glen Marshall Sires is owned by run by the Shield family in Northern Ireland. So we've got a commitment to the UK market. I'm conscious of the challenges that you're having in the UK. The prices have been very difficult. You have to deal with imported pork. You have had high feed prices, and the economics, I believe the latest data showed there was 18% less sows in the UK, which is obviously a reflection of how the industry's been. So it's not unique to what's going on in the world, but it's been difficult in the UK, and I appreciate the challenges you've had, that we've had too. So next slide, please. So Canada, you can see our breeding herd was 1.254 million in 2017, and basically hasn't moved for 5 years. The industry's flat. We basically hold, we don't grow. Next slide, please. Canada is a huge export country. 70% of our pig production is exported as pork to world markets or as live pigs to the U.S. market. I think it's one of the highest percentages of exports of any country in the world. So we really have to pay attention to international markets here in Canada. You can see on price, I use the 1.99 for right now. You look at the Canadian market, it's, we're significantly lower price. We're 1.18 when we calculate to the British pound. Current loss per head in Canada is about 15 GPP per head. One thing I noticed is not necessarily you're profitable, but if you're an importing pork country, you generally have higher prices than exporting countries. The most profitable places in the world to produce pigs over time has been the importing countries. So whether or not you look at China, Japan, Korea, importing countries, generally the producers get significantly more money for their pigs. Next slide, please. So this is exports by country. Spain passed the US recently, significant amount of money. You can see Canada is number 4 in the world on exports with, that's a very significantly smaller sow herd than the countries above us. The one thing I thought interesting with UK, where you're 14 at 538 million. I mean, that's to me, when I look at it, it's very interesting because when you look at your sow herd relative to Spain, you're about 10% the size, but as a percentage, you're actually exporting a pretty significant part of your sow production. I know you import a lot, but it's interesting to me, that factor. So I'm not sure what it all means, but anyway, that's an observation. Next slide, please. So Canada pig production, we're all indoor production. It's too cold for outdoor. I mean, I know I've been to, saw the field farrowing in UK, and certainly it's a different situation here. So out of that 1.2 million plus sows we have, there's 3 major integrated packers where they own the production and have slaughter plants. And that's about, you put the 3 together, it's about 300,000 sows. The other 900,000 sows are in the independent producer control. So about 25%, give or take, of our industry is integrated, and the rest is independent producers. We split across the country about 300,000 sows in Quebec, which Quebec's the French part of Canada, and Ontario has about 300,000 sows. And most of the pig production in Ontario is owned by Dutch people, whether or not they're recent immigrants or their families came, maybe in the 1950s, but they basically have taken over the production in that area. Western provinces, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, about 600,000 sows. Now, what's interesting, the 300,000 sows that are integrated are basically all in Western Canada. They're not in Quebec so much or Ontario. They're in the western part. It's as far as the producers in Western Canada are mostly Germans. There's Mennonites, there's some religious groups that make a big part of that, especially of the independents. There's what you would call Hutterites who live in a colony environment and where everything is owned jointly together, which is kind of interesting in itself. And then Mennonites, which is another Anabaptist group that work independently. But that's basically who owns the independent production in Western Canada. So you got the French in Quebec, the Dutch in Ontario, the Germans in the West. So kind of interesting. But, you know, if you think about it, they're all Northern European. They're not Chinese. So it's interesting. We got a lot of Chinese that immigrate to Canada. We got a lot of Chinese. There isn't one of them has a pig farm. So they might have a lot of pigs in China, but when they come here, they don't seem to want to stay in business. So anyway, just observation. Next slide, please. So pig production, we're evolving to group housing, but it's no law, and it's like a guideline. So it's kind of up in the air. Any new barns generally are putting in pen gestation. There's some renovations into pen gestation. As far as the new barns, there's not many being built. The profitability of the industry or lack of hasn't stimulated much new construction by any means. Our average weaning age is 20 to 21 days. All pigs are castrated. I know you keep animals intact in Great Britain, but we castrate everything here. Live market hog weight is approximately 135 kilograms. Feed costs, you can see there, 104 GBP per feed from fair to finish to take a pig to 135 kilograms. So relatively speaking, our feed costs are a lot less than yours, but you're getting a lot more money for market hog. So next slide, please. So we talked about 70% of the Canadian pork gets exported. A lot of it has been in the past sent to Asia, and still is. But in the last year or so, Spain has been a tremendous competitor versus Canada and the U.S. It's really impacted the exports to Korea, Japan, Philippines, Vietnam. The Spanish are very aggressive. They've taken business. The packing plants that have been, and there were some packing plants in Canada where maybe they export 90% of their pork production. They've had a real tough go financially. The slaughter plants that have more domestic market and brands domestically have done a lot better in the last year. But it's been tough for packers here, profitability wise. Next slide, please. One of the questions was about genetics that I was asked to discuss. Basically, the industry's moved to a Duroc sire on a F1 large white Landers female. Pretty well, we have the same genetic competitors here that you would see in Great Britain right now. You know, PIC, Topegs, the Danish. The Danish is split up in about 4 different companies, but just call them the Danish genetics. There used to be several Canadian breeding companies. Genesus is now the only Canadian swine genetic company. Everybody, you know, use the word last man standing. I'm not too sure sometimes it's a great accomplishment, but we are the only one left. We've exported a lot of pigs around the world. There's an advantage for Canada is one of the better places to export pigs from a health point of view, health acceptance. PIC and Topegs, Norseman have both established major nucleus farms here in Canada for export, to be able to export to other countries. Going back to establishing ourselves with the nucleus farms in England, part of that for ourselves was we believe England is a great place from a health point of view and be able to export breeding stock. And from the British operations, we've sent pigs to Africa, China, other parts of Asia, obviously into Europe some. And we see it very important because you got good health status. Also, you speak English, so we can communicate with our people we partner with pretty easily. So, next slide, please. one of the other questions I was asked, what's the public perception of the pork industry? Really, there isn't much issues here. There's not much discussion. We have no pressures of any extent on housing, antibiotics, castration, weaning age, environment. Rules in place seem to address any issues. I wouldn't say there's nothing, but there's almost nothing as far as any big issues that we're having to deal with. The best thing is have nobody thinking of you. Now, there's some antibiotic-free programs. There's some pen gestation on the pork. They're advertising and selling the pork, but it isn't. Actually, I'll show you some slides where I don't think they're even getting paid in the marketplace for the extra effort they're making. So, next slide, please. Government support. Quebec's unique. It's French. There's a program there called ASRA, which is an insurance program when the price of pigs gets low. The government in conjunction with in the insurance program will pay a top up the industry. Recently, ASRA contributed about $140 million to that industry, which has about 300,000 sows. I'm not too sure if there wasn't government support how real the Quebec industry would be. They don't have much grain. They got to import it. They have economics similar to the Northeast United States, in my opinion, and there's no pigs in Northeast United States. I think it would be interesting to see whether or not the industry would be sustainable without the government start. And to a certain extent, the rest of Canada, as they compete against people that get these subsidies or government support, there's a level of resentment towards it. Next slide, please. Pork consumption in Canada is 22 kilograms, has declined from 26 kilograms in 2015. We believe a big part of this was the drive our industry to produce ever leaner pork. One of the mottos here was the other white meat. We try to brand to chicken. Chicken sells for less money. We took the marbling out of the pork. We took the taste out of the pork. And demand, I think it affects it. We believe that taste drives demand. We've been, maybe some of you read my commentary, but we've been pounding, we stay on message that we believe we have to produce pork that tastes better. That's how we're going to drive demand. We should be competing against beef, not chicken. That's my opinion. Next slide, please. So in Canada, there's a slaughter plant called in Lethbridge, and it's called Heritage Pork. They don't do anything other than, there's no claim other than it's better tasting pork. So I'll show you some price differences here. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So this is one of the major retail chains in Canada. So this is a store we went in and looked at the pork. That's Genesus pork versus other pork. Next slide, please. So you can see, nice store, do a nice presentation. See a butcher counter plus packaged pork. Next slide, please. So this is better tasting pork to the right, which is Genesus. Over 70% of the product that comes out of that plant's Genesus are using our Jersey Red pork. And what's interesting, in the same store, same day, you look at the left, it's an antibiotic-free product. So obviously higher cost production, but you can look that the better tasting pork sells for more money. In the same store, same day. Next slide, please. Same thing again. Antibiotic-free on the left, better tasting pork on the right. Significantly more money. Next slide, please. Same thing again. The one on the left isn't antibiotic-free, it's commodity pork, but compared to the better tasting pork, significantly less money. Next slide. Same thing again. Antibiotic-free sells for less money. And I believe on the antibiotic-free, they're all in pen gestation. On the Lethbridge Heritage, they use antibiotics. They use gestation stalls. There's no claim on it tastes better. And it's, I guess what we're trying to show here is a lot of times we hear that consumers won't pay more money for a better tasting product. I think this part of this to show, yes, they will, but you have to deliver a product that tastes better. You can't just talk about it. You have to deliver that product. Next slide, please. So on the left is commodity pork. On the right is our pork, or the Lethbridge product. You can see it's redder. It's more like beef. We want to produce to compete with the price of beef. And part of it is you got to do it. Next slide, please. Just another part of it. Next slide.
That was the last slide.
Okay, fair enough. One of the things is on, I think we did an updated one anyway. I want to talk about global market reports. I think somehow we missed them. Anyway, no problem. When you go into the stores where the better pork is being, like the pork is being sold for more money, and I've gone into the stores and I've asked the butchers. The butchers are behind glass. They're working there. They don't know who I am, and I asked them. When I went in, I've been into 4 stores, asked the same question. Why would I pay more money for this pork? And every one of them said, taste. Really, at the end of the day, that's what we got to drive is taste. And there's an opportunity here. What I see in Great Britain is you're importing a lot of pork. You've worked hard to develop your brand, to do some things as far as housing management, which to some extent, I guess you could argue whether or not it really has been successful or not. Is there an opportunity to have better tasting pork to drive real demand? And I guess that'd be a challenge question out there. The last thing I guess I would like to mention that we talked about, it isn't on the slide, is as a company, we're doing business around the world. So a little observation, I want to make an observation what I see going on. We do business in China. We have Chinese employees. We have production in China. China, the sow herd has had significant liquidation. There's less pork there. Excuse me. Everybody saw, like in the fall, the price of pork, pigs in China doubled. And then the population of people got sick with COVID and the price collapsed because people were sick, they didn't eat pork. We expect the price is going to recover fairly soon as people's health recover. The pigs still aren't there. They, last from for about 12 months, from about July of 2021 to May of 2022, the Chinese industry lost billions and billions and billions of dollars. We think there was maybe 6 million sows taken out of production in China. I know there's some other analysts who think it was 8 million, whatever, it's a lot. And at some point, they're going to be back in the market looking to purchase more pork, which helps the rest of the world's hog price. That's really what it does. In the United States, the sow herd is down. The number of pigs is down. The price isn't good right now, but we expect it to rebound quite aggressively very soon. In the U.S., they're expecting a drop of 7% of beef supply, which will be very supportive for pork. So the Americans are going to have less pork, they're going to have less beef. That means they got less to move other markets. When we look at Europe, As you know, UK is down 18% in the sow herd. You're seeing lower slaughter numbers right now year over year, and certainly your slaughter pig weights are down significantly. Germany's off 20% in their sow herd from 2 years ago. Poland's down significantly. Netherlands is down. Actually, we got people from Spain visiting us right now in Canada, and the general manager of this pretty good sized production unit yesterday, and they have a slaughter plant, Spanish company, saying, you know, the pigs aren't in Spain. They're short too. So at some point, I mean, it's kind of unique. You already have some countries, including UK, some of the highest prices in history. But I think it's going to get higher yet, because there's going to be less pigs going forward than there has been. I mean, we all know, like you watch UK, your sow herd went down, was decreased, but it takes a while before that decrease kicks into the slaughter hog numbers. You're seeing it now, but it took a while. Took a while, probably longer than what most people thought. So when I look at the global pig production, it's going to be down, and I think it's going to be down, and it's going to be very supportive to pig prices everywhere. That's my opinion. So anyway, lots of opinions, some observations. Appreciate the opportunity to talk, and I'd welcome any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim. I can't actually see the questions. Tony, are there any? Can you ask them?
I can indeed, mate. We've got a few actually. When you say integrated production, is that processor integration only, or is it feed production integrated?
Good question. When I use integrated, it would be packers who own pigs. Okay. But there's another, it's a good question. A lot of the independent producers in Canada grow a significant amount of their feed. So that's a form of integration too. So that's, you know, if you grow your feed, those people have had, they've been okay financially because they've been rewarded. They kind of put the expensive feed through their hogs. And there's been a huge, with the high fertilizer costs, there's been a big benefit from the utilization of manure.
Next one. Does Canada view the UK as a potential export market?
I don't think, to be honest, I don't think anybody much thinks about it. So I don't, there's not much discussion about it.
Fair enough. Another one. Where are we? In terms of being, you're totally slatted indoors, what form of enrichment would be, if any, would be given?
Some if people decide to do that themselves, but there's no regulations.
So would that mainly be, would that be straw or other products?
Little balls or whatever. We have no regulations mandating anything like that. Some people do it voluntarily, but there's no rules or guidelines to do it.
Back down to another practical question. Is there any amount of soya-free diet feeding in Canada, given the presence of canola, peas, and other alternative proteins?
There's some of that done, but soybean, I would say soy meal pretty well ends up in all the rations.
How is the industry in terms of labour? Is the industry successful at attracting new staff members?
The only way we've been successful is immigration, bringing in people on work visas, this type of thing. There's different programs. We have currently quite a few Filipinos in the barns in Canada, quite a few Mexicans. The Mexicans can come in pretty easy because of the North American Free Trade Agreement if they got some degree of education. And the other, recently we bring in quite a few Ukrainians before the war and after the war. Like Canada's fast tracking Ukrainians to come and work here. We just hired a couple of Ukrainians on our own farm, Canada is a big immigrant country. We got 38 million people. We're expecting 450,000 legal immigrants this year. So we take a high, as a percentage of population, we probably bring in as many immigrants as any country in the world, legal immigrants anyway.
I'm going to combine a couple of questions into one. What is your opinion on using entire males for slaughter? Are you still using ractopamine and paline? And do you, for castration, is it physical or is it injection?
I don't have an opinion one way or the other on whether a boar's pig should be raised as boars or barrows. I know there's the advantage with a barrow is you can get a higher marbling than a boar, which helps the taste. As far as paline basically is gone from Canada and the United States. It was a legal product that was used, but what happened is China said they wouldn't take paline pigs, so basically ended all paline utilization. What was the third question?
That's a good one. So I linked them all together. In terms of castration, physical or injectable?
There's a bit. I would say it's 98% physical. There's 2% maybe using injection. There's no real pressure here to stop castration, like from consumers. Nobody even talks about it. Like I don't know how to describe it. The people that sell the injection, they think it'd be a good idea, but not sure about anybody else.
Another one for you. Is there a national traceability program in Canada?
Yes, there is. Everything has a track that is traced.
And another one. You said that it's currently minus 33 degrees where you are. How does that affect pigs in transport when you're moving them over considerable distances?
You know, generally we don't have too much trouble. We've learned how to keep the trailers boarded and bed them enough, and you make sure you have enough pigs in the trailer. In a way, we have a bigger challenge moving when it's 35 centigrade plus than we do in the cold.
So you don't get things like frostbite on the pigs moving in trailers or anything like that?
You can. It's happened, but generally it's not been a big issue. I think the thing is we've learned how to deal with it. Like we're moving pigs today. Like nobody stopped moving anything. We ran pigs. I shouldn't say this probably. We just ran pigs to Miami for an export. You know what I mean? Left from here. I mean, they went through everywhere a long time too on the transport.
Okay. Another one. Are your exports focused on Asia only, or do you have other key market that you're looking at?
Like Canadian pork exports?
Yeah.
We export a significant amount to the United States and Mexico. There's some that goes to Colombia, but mostly the bulk of it's Asia.
Oh, they're coming in thick and fast now, Jim. Do the industry have a recognised measure of the amount of antibiotics being used?
No,
That's easily answered then.
the word was accurate. There's an estimation. I'm not too sure I'd call that accurate, but certainly most of the data would indicate antibiotic use is declined in general.
You may have answered this one already, and partly in your speech, but most of Europe are being made to adhere to stringent environmental changes and regulations to comply with carbon emissions. How is this happening in Canada, if it is?
There's really hasn't been much legislation carbon-wise that affected the swine industry up till now. There's environmental rules on the land, on manure, like we have to test the soil to make sure we don't over nutrient the per acre. But carbon so far, there's discussion but no reality at this point.
At the moment, that's all the questions.
Okay. Very good.
So if anybody's got any, get typing now, because this is your last chance. No, that's it, Pat. All used
That's
up.
it. Okay, well, thank you very much. If anyone does think of another question, if they'd like to get in touch with Tony or myself, we'll forward it to Jim and get it answered if we can.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor and a pleasure to speak to everybody tonight. And I hope everybody we all need some luck in this business. It's been a tough grind for people who own pigs. And it's been a tough grind in a lot of countries. And one thing about being a pig producer, we're a pretty resilient bunch. And I would think anybody on here has fought the wars and ready to keep moving forward. So I wish you all the best and all the luck. Thank you.
And no, thank you very much, Jim. That was very, very interesting. Sorry for the technical issues at the very beginning, but yeah, sorry about that. Sorry, I'm just trying to find another slide, but it seems to have disappeared. So just keep the date free. We have another international pig club coming up on March the 27th. And correct me if I'm wrong, Tony, but it is from China, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. So save that date, March the 27th, and hopefully see you all again. So thank you very much for attending, and see you then.
Thank you, Jim.
Cheers. Thank you very much, Jim. That was exceedingly interesting.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Cheers. Thank you very much.